Hello and welcome to the Voice of Bold Business Radio. I am Jessica Dewell of Red Direction, your host. Today we are talking about a movie that Tanya totally mentioned by accident, and I went, "Ooh, I just watched that and I love that." So let's talk about that on our show together. And when I was preparing the program, I came up with 11 truths for life in the Waffle House. However, due to the amount of time that we have, we picked 3 to talk about. So you'll probably see the other 8 some other time, some other place. Today we're talking about 3 truths about life in the Waffle House. I want to start by telling a story, and this story starts with me completely frantic, completely out of control, and it's because my husband is in danger. He is in imminent danger where he is going to die. And do you know who comes to the rescue? Danny Glover comes to the rescue. And yeah, this is a dream that I had. So I have met Danny Glover in my dreams, and he is actually an instrumental part of just a steadfast anchor to the whole story of the Waffle House. And so I wanted to make sure I brought that up because it's not very often I get to share dreams in context, and it's also not very often that I get to share a dream that I absolutely love. And Danny Glover has a beautiful place in my heart now because he saved my husband in my dreams. After this, we will come right back and we're going to jump right into our program 3 of the Voice of Bold Business Radio, where we're talking about 3 truths about life and the Waffle House.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Dewell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less. And now, here's Jessica.
Okay, so I've already shared a dream, which may put me out with some people. I have no idea, right? This wonderful dream of Danny Glover. And by the way, he has shown up in my dreams other times, and I don't know why. It's like he's walking by and says hi. So
Have you watched a movie before the dream?
No, but I can tell you it happened. I love Die Hard. Okay, so the Die Hard, I don't know how many there are now, but I was raised on those movies with Bruce Willis. And so it was really funny when I finally watched Lethal Weapon, because I'm like, where have I been and what have I been doing and how did I not know about Lethal Weapon? And so this dream happened, I don't know, it was at least a year after I first saw Lethal Weapon. So there was no direct correlation. Yeah. But I did want to tell you, I need to tell you about my scarf. Okay, so here's the other weird thing that I inadvertently have become a collector of silk scarves. And this particular scarf, it's a beautiful color for the beautiful day we're having as the leaves are changing and the air is getting colder. And this is this amazingly beautiful gold scarf that my friend and colleague Scott Scowcroft gave me as a gift. And I have to tell you, I received several scarves from him that were that were his wife's at one point. And I love every single one of them, and I'm excited that we're now back into a season. I can pull them out and wear them. So Scott, I know when you see this, when you're doing the editing and putting it all together, I want you to know I'm super excited to be wearing this scarf of Aaron's today. Yeah. And, you know, it's amazing how we should probably start there. This amazing concept of gift giving. And when we are thinking about gifts, everybody has their own reason for giving gifts. Some want to make another person happy. Some want to make themselves happy. Some are trying to create some sort of influence. And some are being selfless, and that's just how they are love. And so I'm curious, Tanya, what is the most loving gift that you have ever received from somebody from your perspective of love?
Life.
Life? Oh, so that would be a mama and a daddy?
Yeah, life. Absolutely. I think life is the most precious gift that we're given, and it's done out of love.
Yes, completely done out of love. Mm-hmm. The love that it takes to, well, you know, actually making babies can be fun and loving, but also what comes after that, right? The whole concept of being there for another being, showing up in a specific way, recognizing that part of love is not solving everybody else's problems around us. I think, that's hard for some people.
And as far as gift giving goes, not everything is material.
Have you ever read the book, The 5 Love Languages?
I've heard of it, but never had an opportunity to read it.
Well, they've made variations of this, of course, for kids and for adults and all kinds of situations. I think there are 3 or 4 or 5 love languages books, and I read it a long time ago. And so, the 5 different ways that people give love include, I may not get them all, but they include quality time, giving of gifts, touch, and language. And then there's one more. And I have to tell you, once I figured that out, it really allowed me to recognize how to better recognize the love somebody else was giving the world.
Even the gift of time is unbelievable. I've had people tell me that you spent time with me on the phone when nobody else would take my call. And I was going through a major crisis, or I just needed to vent, or I needed some advice, or I needed someone to listen to me without judging me. And how valuable that is, it's overlooked, because when we're thinking of gifts, we're thinking of jewelry, we're thinking of things that you go buy in the store, clothing, new car, you're thinking of those kind of material type gifts.
Whatever I need, I will figure out how to get it purchased. So I'm really hard to buy gifts for, and quality time and just sitting next to each other. And if it's my sister bumping elbows, if it's Ryan having our arms entwined and our legs touching while we're kicking, we've kicked back and we're each reading a book or we're watching TV. I love the concept of quality time. And I also like the concept of intention, right? So my sister, this is hilarious. Like I said, I'm really hard to shop for, and I don't need a lot of stuff, nor do I want a lot of stuff. And I have a cup of happy here that came as a set that my sister bought me. I think it was a housewarming gift. So, and my son calls her Bug. So thanks, Bug, for that. But the intention is there. The intention is, I thought of something that I think you would like. I mean, they were the 2 best gifts I ever got. You know what they were? The first was grapefruit bowls from my friend Angela, because it was bigger than a regular cereal bowl. And she and I, when in high school, we would eat ice cream together. And that was kind of like the thing that we did when everything else was going wrong, or when everything else was crazy, we would stop and we'd eat ice cream together. So she gave me ice cream bowls that were shaped like grapefruits. And the other one was a butter dish. Okay. And I was so excited. And that was from my husband. So when people really take a look at what you have or what you need or the thought that you have, I think it becomes an intention. And this kind of leads into the 3 truths that we're going to talk about today. The first being, even when we're the scapegoat, so when we get hurt, when we're thrown under the bus, something like that, we don't ever have to do that to another person. Our intention can be different. And that's a pretty big, important thing, which is where all the love conversation came from. The second one is that problem solving is immediately useful everywhere and anytime. And that's also, there's an intention underlying that as well. And the third one, when we do things that we don't know if we're going to like or not, that's where we find out if we're facing our own fear, if we have a natural talent, or if we're being called forward to do something. So those were the 3 main ones that I thought would be good that we could tie around intention. What are your initial thoughts around those 3 truths, Tanya, and intention?
First one really resonates with me a lot. There's a quote that says, when you're over something, when you have the opportunity to run over that person and you choose not to.
I want that whole quote. We will put that in the program notes.
I have a very interesting story. I was working with another recruiter on a role for a human resources manager. And we normally don't work on these kind of roles because mostly what we do is tech.
Yeah.
We got a large deal and it included this role with a bunch of technology roles. So we said, okay, we're both human resources professionals. We both know the industry really well. We know a lot of people. We can get somebody in this role. Well, my friend used to work at this corporation maybe 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And she lost her job. And the guy responsible for her losing her job, was careless and had no thought whatsoever, and just pretty much, she was unemployed for about, I think, 6 months after that. And it was a lot of hardship because she had lost her job. This guy emailed her and said, do you know of any open opportunities as a human resources manager? She could have easily told him, no, I don't know of anything. Sorry, I wish I could help you. Instead, she stuck by him. She could have, been really mean and nasty. She could have told people, don't hire this guy. Mm-hmm. She could have done a lot of different things within the network of recruiters. And instead, she got this guy a couple of interviews, and he just landed a job after being unemployed for 9 months.
Tell me what the moral of this story is for you.
For me, it's forgiving other people when they've done harm to you. Someone has thrown you underneath the bus and you have the opportunity to run over them and you don't. I think you become the bigger person, you become the better person.
And that shows up in a lot of ways, doesn't it? It shows up in office gossip. It shows up in the opinions of people on discussion boards and in forums. It becomes almost like this concept of you're on my team or you're not on my team. And even if you're not on the same team, there's nothing wrong with that. And as long as we can recognize we've got our way of doing things and other people have theirs, and they might be good people and they might be making bad decisions. They might be good people and they might just be having a really off day. They might be a really good person and they're not quite sure how to handle and manage their emotions.
You find a trickle down. You hear a lot about bad bosses. Mm-hmm. And there are bosses out there in a lot of organizations where they put coworkers against each other. And they create an environment almost like Survivor.
Well, you know where that was that just happened in the news, yeah? With Wells Fargo?
Yep.
The super toxic, the high expectations, the push into the intention is good to sell products, yet the ways that people felt forced into doing things, it was really in opposition to what the initial intention was. So there was a great big rift there.
Yeah, I mean, when you're pressuring people to meet numbers versus real expectations, you're going to find people who will do anything to meet those numbers because they're scared to lose a job.
I think that's a really important piece. And so, we're talking about forgiveness right now in this section of the Voice of Bold Business Radio, Program 3, where we're talking about the 3 truths about life in the Waffle House. And when we've got this concept of realistic versus unrealistic, and I think it goes back to some other things. People who, yes, they'll do whatever it takes because they feel like they have to. They need a job. They want to pay their bills. They want to contribute to their family. They want to contribute to something bigger than themselves. And there are some studies out there that are in social psychology where if you stick a whole bunch of people in a room together, and the study was all these people were told to have a certain opinion, and they picked somebody who was going to have an opinion that they knew would be different. Then they asked the question and they asked each person to voice their opinion. The person who was the focus of the experiment, the different opinion, when put in a group, they changed their opinion so that they would fit in and be accepted.
And then you find people that are really just tired. They want to be done. So a good example is a jury. Okay. They're in there deliberating all day, and everybody has to agree in order to, to pass a verdict. And I think it's almost dangerous when everybody's pressuring for one decision over another.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. And let's apply that to the leader of an organization. I was listening to a podcast yesterday called The 5 Leadership Questions, and they always have some good questions, and they have some great guests. And one of the things that they talked about was if you consider yourself a leader, you're usually walking by yourself. And I have a serious problem with that on many levels, because there are skills of leadership and there are skills that are necessary to have good communication, to interact, to do cooperative work and get to an end goal. Yet at the same point in time, somebody's always going to be leading the line. Unless you're maybe even in a company of one, somebody's leading that line. It just happens to be you. And you have vendors and everybody else that's going to fall in line behind you to get what needs done. When you're in an organization of 100, it's usually one leader and then a whole bunch of like the second tier line leaders that are responsible for carrying out the vision of a company. And being a leader is a very big, important, responsible thing. And somebody has to make the choice and decide which way to go. Now, how they choose to communicate that will foster, are you walking alone or are you walking with everybody that's on your team? And so I think that there's a difference between being a leader and setting a direction and having a responsibility for the outcome, providing the solution that the business has to offer. And just because I'm in this position of leader, I'm automatically alienated. What do you think about that?
I don't think so. And it's just been my experience. I've been in leadership roles, and I know that you're only as good as your team. Mm-hmm. So you really depend on information from your team. You're not going to know everything. You're obviously not going to be an expert in everything. Leaders tend to be generalists, so they know a little bit of everything that's going on. If you were to take a leader and put him in one job and say, you're going to have to do this. A good example is that show, Undercover Boss. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good one.
They take these guys that are leaders, CEOs, vice presidents, and they stick them, a good example, at a restaurant, where one of the restaurants that they own, and they tell them, well, you're going to cook.
Okay.
Well, that guy never cooked in his life. So you're really dependent on hearing from everybody from bottom up of what's going on. And so how that's tiered is the people way below report to their managers, who report to their managers, and then ends up going to you somehow. You don't really walk alone. There are times where you're really solicit input from your teams and ask them, well, what's going to work in this situation? I need to know them from marketing. I need to hear from finance. I need to hear from legal. We have this big problem and we need to solve it. I need to hear from all of the teams. I'm not going to make this decision without information.
So we're talking about communication loops at this point, which I agree with. So the leader, the person ultimately responsible for delivering the mission successfully and then achieving company-wide goals of growth expectations, of technology changes, of other marketplace changes. It's the communication loop that really matters. And there are degrees of separation. I mean, even though if you go to our LinkedIn profiles, there are people that we're linked together, that we can link together without ever knowing or seeing. And so our network is actually pretty large when we use it and leverage it correctly. So whether that be the network on LinkedIn, whether that be within our own organization. And, vulnerability and transparency are sometimes interchanged, and they're very different. They're very different creatures, because we can be vulnerable toward the front of the line, yet we can't discuss our concerns with people that we lead. The reason being, while we could, it puts undue stress on them. The reason being, leaders that lead well, leaders that get people to follow, are the ones that remove obstacles. They're not. I remember I reported to the president right after my company was bought in 1999, and I always wondered why he never gave me the whole story. I knew I was never getting the whole story, and I always wondered about that. And one day he actually said to me, he said, "Jessica, I am only telling you the things that you need to know, because my job is to make the path for you to run far and achieve all these goals that we have. Your job is to go take your team and go get these goals." And I thought that was a very interesting thing. So there could be a misunderstanding a little bit from boss to employee and employee to boss of, well, they're not really being transparent with me. They very well could be. But at the same point in time, they are also taking the time to go, what does this person need to know to help them do the best they can, to do the best I see in them, so we're achieving our goals, instead of sharing stress that tends to weigh everybody down?
That makes sense to a point, but I've also seen leaders come very hard on their teams. I deal with a lot of startups, so the culture it can be very unique in the sense. There's one particular startup that I've noticed. They think that the way that Steve Jobs communicates is the best way to communicate.
That's funny, because in the end, when Steve Jobs asked what his greatest his greatest achievement was the person asking the question expected it to be a piece of technology. And he said, the people that I saw my vision coming to fruition through. Isn't that pretty amazing? So the communication style is very different than the end interpretation.
Yeah. The thing about Steve Jobs, and I've seen several films, read several books. I didn't know a lot about him until he died. And so I was curious about his life. I was curious about, I'd read a few stories. One is the famous elevator story where he fired a woman on an elevator, just beating her. And, their personal style is being very blunt without being polite. There's no need to be polite. I'm going to tell you exactly how I feel, and you can take it or leave it.
I will link to this because I reference it often, and that is there's this concept of radical candor. And radical candor is doing what needs to be done in the moment, even when it hurts. It's not because it's easier, it's more convenient, or this is just the way that I am. That type of candidness, that radical candor is in the moment, genuine connection to want people to do better, to want the person who's receiving this feedback to do better. And in the case of the elevator story, we weren't there. It probably will come across harsh, but maybe, and I'm going to play devil's advocate here, it was easier for him, and it was in his communication style to not beat around the bush and to be very direct. At the same point in time, maybe he saw something in her that wasn't going to come out in his company. And letting her go was the way for her to find that for herself. And we will never know that. And, we're talking about communication style. We're talking about difficult and very under pressure, unrealistic sales cultures. And it really is hard to be a lone voice in that. And so the thing to know is that when we're in that situation, we may make one choice, and it may go against all of our own internal values. And it may actually be going against the values of the company that we are working toward, this common goal of providing products and solutions to people that need them. Yet when we leave, maybe we don't recognize it. Maybe it comes out as burnout. Maybe it comes out as a sickness, and maybe it comes out as something else where we end up getting fired. So whatever the reason is that will cause somebody to leave would be a good reason to take a good look at the self and say, we don't have to ever do that to somebody else. And now we know what that's like. We can better ask questions for the next organization we go to and become part of, so that we don't have to encounter that situation ever again. Now, ever again is a really long time.
I don't know. I mean, now that I'm Googling this and I'm just taking a look, apparently this became like a legend, and people avoid going onto the elevator at Apple.
Well, it's a good way to get your steps in. Keep that blood moving too.
Since some people are saying the story's not true, it's just a legend.
That is a problem-solving technique, which is also, that's the second truth. Problem-solving is immediately useful everywhere. And when we take the time to learn the steps and practice the steps of problem-solving, then we are able to show up, do what needs to get done. We understand that we might have to actually do some hard work in the process, yet it's rewarding and fulfilling afterwards, because not only do we see a solution that we found come into play, we've also added value to the team and the organization and the project.
When I had graduated college and I went ahead and did an MBA, one of my coworkers said that education is crucial because it shows that you're trainable.
Well, that's true. That was actually one reason that our K through 12 was created, was to groom us to be able to follow directions, know what to do, know exactly how to do certain things, so that we could then go work in a plant, on a plantation as a plumber or an electrician. That was actually a driving factor for having some education, some training, if you will, beforehand. And then college, right? College changed over the years too. It became this place of building relationships that lasted, having experiences that tie people together, both good and bad. It goes back to the journey and the spectrum of emotions in between. And those were the people that you supported and supported you, regardless of where you were on the planet. at some later date and time. You could always call them up and talk to them about that. They were your closest confidants. And now we're talking about getting trained more versus in college as an intellectual place and a relationship skill, life experience place. And I think it's an interesting dichotomy, and I can't wait to see what higher education becomes in the next 10 years.
I'm hoping that it'll be more towards solid skills. Right now, it's not seen as much of an asset unless you go to graduate school. There are very few entry-level jobs where you can just jump into them. And I'm hoping that we'll see more entry-level employment, more training programs, more apprenticeships. The UK is doing something very interesting. They're doing apprenticeships for whether you went to college or not, and they're doing them in HR. They're doing them in finance and different things. They have these apprenticeships. So I think the programs that we have need a little bit more than that. Right now, you sign up for a bunch of classes, and they're all mostly general ed, and then you sign up for stuff in your major. But the real life experiences, you're not really ready for them like you should be.
I'm going to share this story. I'm pretty sure I will avoid names just in case the person doesn't want to be known for sharing this story. Here in Boulder, I took a parenting class, and I loved the parenting class. I do that because at some point in time, everything I've done quits working. And so I recognize that my role in this has to be looked at as well. and plus, I want to know, I'm curious, how do you develop lasting, loving relationships that travel through time and through situations? So when my son Carter grows up, I want him to be comfortable and confident enough that he knows how to utilize me without me taking over. And one of the stories that this teacher was sharing with my class was that college kids are coming to move in to University of Colorado in Boulder, CU here. Everybody moves in. Well, the parents come. When I went to college, that was 18 years ago. Even just 18 years ago, my mom packed up my stuff with me, and she helped me get it unpacked because it took 2 cars to get down there. She unpacked her car, and then she left. She was like, okay, see you, bye. And I had to figure out what I didn't have, and I had to use my own money to go figure out where to get it and what stores to go to, all that good stuff. Apparently, the current trend is that kids are relying on their parents to move them in, to find out what type of storage they need, what they might have forgotten when they left home, and get it all squared away. They're also calling college professors to work out homework and assignment schedules. They're not letting their adult children early in their adult life at 18 and 19 do this for themselves. And I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking about what you were saying about the apprenticeship that they're doing in the UK. And I know in Germany they have 2 tracks, and at some point in somewhere around middle school age, you take a test and you find out which track you go to. Do you go on the track that's going to put you into university, or do you go on to a track that's going to put you into an amazing trade school? And so they're finding people's talent early and helping them get the skills that they need before they're ready to go to the workforce. And we're missing that. And not only are we missing that, parents are not letting their children problem solve. They're not letting their children have these experiences. It's a pretty big deal. I mean, would you rather have your kid not turn in homework and get a bad grade? Or would you rather have your kid as an adult get a job, not do a project, and get fired and not be able to pay their bills and move home?
There are people that I know in their mid to late 30s who still call mom for everything.
Yeah.
I mean, every little thing they call mom, and I can't fathom, because they're professional people. They're people that have become attorneys and doctors and have become executives, even directors, and they call mom for everything. Mom, can you come do my laundry? Mom, can you come do this? Mom, can you come do that?
And so where does it fall to? It falls to, I'm going to go back to this, the leader of an organization to decide what the culture is going to be like and the skills that are necessary, knowing that everybody that comes in is not going to have the skills necessary to do the job. So that's where the aptitude and the attitude and the willingness and the openness of candidates, of somebody looking for a job at any age, bring to the table. There aren't that many steps to problem solving, and we can do it every day, from holy cow, I just ran out of toothpaste, what can I do, to man, I hit the snooze too many times and I'm going to be late for my meeting, what can I do, to wow, I'm on the side of the road, it's snowing outside, and I hit something and my tire blew up. What am I going to do? To even in the workplace, oh my gosh, I think somebody just razzed me in a very unprofessional way that cut me to the core. What do I do? You know, there's a very different thing of, oh, what do I do, versus immediately whining. And not that people out there are whining. I would like to say not the people that are out there are whining, but there's a real truth to practicing the steps of problem solving when at work, and knowing that those problem solving steps can go home too, into other parts of life. And so it's unfortunately a blessing and a curse. I mean, the blessing is companies are going to invest in people to build the skill of problem solving that they can take with them and that they can use in a whole bunch of different scenarios, because that's what it's all about. The other piece of that is, though, it becomes the responsibility, which is an added expense, which is a time investment to develop these people. And a lot of times I know there's a critical junction of, I don't want to train all these people if they're just going to leave me in 2 years.
There's something that's been going around LinkedIn, and it's a conversation between a CEO and a CFO. Mm-hmm. And he says, I really don't want to spend money and train these people if they're going to leave me. You know, what happens if I train them and they leave me? And then he says, what happens if they don't? If you don't train them and they stay? You're not going to build any innovation. You're not going to build capabilities within your team. And that goes along the lines of, you know, how we treat people. Mm-hmm. I believe that there's still workplaces out there where people stay 20, 30 years. You have to look as to why people stay 20, 30 years.
Yep.
They're treated well. They have no real reason to look out for another job, and they're happy. So if you create, you know, environment where people are well trained, well paid, and happy, then you have it made. And I think there's a lot of challenges in between there. As the top leader, you don't know what your other managers are always doing. And sometimes you might have a really bad manager, and there's a lot of attrition in one particular sector. I mean, when I was working at a corporation, there was one part of the company that had a lot of turnover. And people always assumed that it was the nature of the work. But when human resources did their audit each year and came back and talked to employees and did the surveys, and they found that it was the time structure, it was the way that the managers behaved that got people to quit, and it was the way that raises were handed out that got people to quit. Yeah. So it wasn't the fact that this particular industry or particular type of job had a lot of turnover, it was how people were treated.
That's interesting. So there's the problem, how people were treated. And let's apply the 4 steps of problem solving to that. We're not going to come up with the solution here, but we can apply the 4 steps of problem solving to that. First, recognize there's a problem. There's high turnover. Why is there high turnover? We're going to start collecting data. What are the things that cause the most strife amongst people? When are the times most people quit? What are the actions or the situations that are occurring right around the times these people are leaving? What's coming back on performance reviews? All kinds of interesting data, which will frame the solution. That it will solutions. There's going to be more than one way to do anything, but to find the right solution for the right time, so the right time, the right place, really comes down to, well, what do you want the outcome to be? And does it fit with the values and the long-term vision of the company? And if it does those things, that's pretty cool. You can do the 4th step, which is to choose a solution and implement it. And so one thing, when people say problem solving, everybody that I talk to, their first response, most of the time, if they don't know or they don't practice problem solving on a regular basis, their response to me is, well, how do I know which one is the best solution? I'm like, well, we don't. We can only get close, and then we make a decision based off of what's close, and we put it into action, and we see what happens, and we course correct. We act, we plan, we act, we plan, we act, we plan through that cycle, because that's what allows us to take the right solution for the right time, for the values and the long-term vision, and get something right now. I mean, we don't always have to be thinking 3 and 4 and 5 steps ahead, and we definitely don't need to be wallowing or celebrating in our past only.
The first solution might need a tweak.
Yeah.
So you won't know until you try it.
And I think also people think choosing the solution is the end of the process. And the other piece of that would be just like what you're saying, Tanya, choose a solution, implement it, and then iterate what needs to happen. Where is it? What direction did it go? Is it what we thought? Well, that's okay if it is. Great. It's also okay if it's not. Great. We have more information to refine and narrow, because most likely the whole solution did not change. How the solution gets implemented is what changes.
And in that, you collect more data.
Right.
So you just keep going at it, and you keep, there's not a one size fits all. So you just keep going at it.
Mm-hmm.
But
and
until you go through those steps, how do you know what to solve? And just to make an assumption, say we just skipped the second step, which was to collect data, and we assumed that it was the industry. This is the type of industry that has a lot of people leaving, and this is why. And we just make that assumption, and we say, okay, that's fine. We'll just continue to hire people. And that comes at a cost.
And also, do you really want to be like everybody else? Are you really settling for what the quote unquote norm is? Because in today's world, it's so busy. The only way to thrive and create sustainability long term is to figure out what things you don't like about what's going on in your industry and do it differently.
And if you can make some improvements to way of life for your employees, that saves money as well. There's a huge cost in recruiting new employees.
Right.
There's a training time. There's a lot of things that people don't figure. People figure, okay, he's going to quit. I'll get somebody else.
Whether we're talking about the problems that we face in a business, or we're talking about our own personal truths around what we're talking about, which, by the way, so the third truth that we picked out for this conversation is, until we do something, we don't know if we like it. We also don't know if we have to face a fear and face a limiting belief and work through that. I always like the story of the seatbelt with my son Carter. And right now he's doing, the second favorite one is homework. And I love how we can look to kids to give us situations, because every single one of you, when I tell you this story, you're going to go, I know somebody like this, and they're an adult. So that's one of my favorite things. And so here I am. Yesterday, I picked Carter up from school. We were going to an appointment, and he's sitting in the back seat going, okay, he's 5 and he's in kindergarten, and his kindergarten doesn't have homework. He goes, you make me do my homework every day. And I'm looking at him, I'm like, okay, all right. I'm like, really? He goes, yes. Don't you see this piece of paper and this pen that's in the car right now waiting for me at school? I'm like, well, yeah, you put it here this morning. No, you're making me do this. Right? And so it goes on and on and on. And basically, I'm not sure where he's looking for acceptance at, except for the fact that he goes to a different school than 2 of his friends. And the 2 of his friends, they have optional homework in kindergarten for practicing letters, writing them out, and practicing numbers, writing them out. And so he decided he was going to do homework, and he keeps talking about how hard it is, and he keeps talking about how horrible this is. And all we're doing, Ryan and I, all we're doing is going, oh, we see you're working on a project. No, I'm doing my homework. Oh, cool. And so I started sitting down and saying, hey, I'm doing my work now and I like it. Or, you know what? This is a part of work that I don't really like very much. It's going to get me to something that I do like. So I'm going to go ahead and get it done. It's my responsibility. So I'm trying to model different language, because I don't know where the language is coming from. I just know he's heard it or experienced it somewhere. And I'm like, well, that's pretty limiting. It's closed. It gets into the concept of mindset. Here's my mindset book. Closed versus open mindset. And the way we talk and the way we experience and the way we look at our own results will basically predict, will we try new things in the face of fear and unknown? Or will we just stay closed, and will we avoid it at all costs, because we're going to do no matter what? We're going to do what we do. No matter what, we're going to, we're going to protect what we believe. And so we need to challenge those limiting beliefs. And I have to admit, We're out of time, Tanya. So do you want to say anything else to help wrap up this conversation on our last truth?
In life, we have to try new things. We won't know until we try. And so just keeping open.
That's right. Keeping it open. Well, thank you. And I'm really excited about the conversation that we had today. I rambled a little bit, and I don't necessarily think it was rambling, but I definitely told some in-depth stories, which was a little different. But I get excited about this topic because whether in this movie, okay, so first and foremost, we titled this about Waffle Street, and we really didn't talk about the movie at all. So this was not necessarily a teaser or going to be a spoil alert for the movie. This is definitely, we all have these situations that happen to us, and it's how we show up and it's what we do with them that really matters. And so the three truths that Tanya and I were talking about today, even when we're the scapegoat, we never have to do that to another person. Problem solving is immediately useful everywhere. And until we do something, we don't know if we really like it or if we're holding up a limiting belief for ourselves. And in all of that, all three of those things are underlined by intention. And whether the intention is love, whether the intention is success, whether the intention is drive, whether the intention is contentment or happiness, whatever that is, will be different for each and every one of us. The truths still stand regardless of that. And that's the part that we want you to walk away with today. So we develop our greatest strengths and we get into a groove. We figure out how to make the most of what we're good at, and we rise. We rise to above what we thought possible through our actions and our intention. Then sometimes something crazy will happen in spite of all of that. We have to come back to the three truths underlined with our intention of what we want, so we don't get lost in our own hype, so we don't burn out, so we can weather the hardships in life as well. Okay, and I'm going to close with a quote, and I'm going to shout out to Danny Glover. By the way, Danny, you are welcome on the Voice of Bold Business anytime.
Maybe we should send him a letter or an email or
I know, right?
a phone call or something.
That would be pretty awesome. So there's no such thing as a free lunch. Work is always required. And here's Danny's quote. I try to find hope in struggle and resistance in small places as much as I can. That's what that's one of Danny Glover's quotes. So keep it real with our three truths about life and the Waffle House. And we recommend you go watch the movie. More importantly, we recommend that you think about your intention and these three truths. Thanks so much. You can find the program notes at voiceofboldbusiness.com/program3. You may also search the site for three truths about life in the Waffle House. And until next time.
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Dewell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.